Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, JJ Virgin here. On my podcast, Well Beyond 40, we ditch the idea of aging gracefully and go all in on aging powerfully. Every week I host powerful experts who can give you powerful insights on building muscle, boosting your energy, and feeling amazing no matter what your age. This is your one life, and trust me, being smarter and stronger are superpowers that can turn lifespan into strength span. Listen to Well Beyond 40 wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 566, Thou Shalt Not Pass. Last time, General Wolfgang Fleischer's 10th Panzer Division pushed American forces off two ridges just south of the northern route, while a panzer regiment using the southern road was mauled by French artillery. Then the rains came, making it all but impossible for vehicles to move. Meanwhile, Rommel at Mersa Brega was ordered to hold fast by a distracted Hitler. Monty caught up to Rommel and decided on a feigning frontal attack while the New Zealanders went around the southern end of the German line. But Rommel got wind of this due to his prudent air reconnaissance. What to do now? The New Zealanders moved out on December 15th and would keep going until they got to the end of Rommel's line. Meanwhile, Monty had infantry hit the Italians who were closer to the coast. Rommel rushed word of the Allied attack plan to the Comando Supremo, Ugo Cavallero, the only person with supreme authority besides Hitler. Not wanting to see the three Italian divisions defeated or captured, and Rommel's forces mauled, as Italy would obviously be the next target, a further retreat was permitted. On a side note, the old Rommel was still there. Watching Freiburg's New Zealanders get far enough away from Monty's forces to be unsupported, he was dying to sick his Afrika Korps on them, but now was not the time. Besides, his limited fuel made that a fantasy. Afrika Korps retreated quick smart. Freiburg's forces, having reached the southern end, were now racing to the north, and they reached the coast during the night of December 15th, but all that was left was the Axis rear guard. And though the two sides clashed, the Germans and Italians wisely broke into small groups and slipped through the Allied net the next day, December 16th. Freiburg, though, did manage to grab 18 enemy tanks, 25 guns, and 450 prisoners. But more importantly, militarily and politically, it never hurt to have a victory in any form. The Allies had finally turned the corner of Tripolitania, this being their third attempt. Just behind or west of Mersa Brega, the starting point of Rommel's latest retreat, was the southern tip of the Gulf of Sidra. From there, the land drifts to the northwest, on its way to Tripoli, near the western border of Libya. By the time Rommel stopped his retreat, he and his were at Burat, a little more than halfway between Mersa Brega and Tripoli, which called for another Axis commanders' meeting in Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. The talks went from December 18th to the 20th. Hitler only said that Rommel should stand there and fight to the last, and that's all he said. But a more measured response was decided upon in the end. Once again, leaning on the Comando Supremo, Rommel was given permission to fall back into Tunisian territory. But first, he had to promise to stall the British Eighth Army for at least 2 months to give the Germans in northern Tunisia a chance to push out the Americans and the British there. Rommel wasn't happy with this compromise, not that he had much of a choice, for the simple reason that, as he was expected to hold back the British Eighth Army at the Mareth defenses, about 50 miles inside Tunisia, upon inspection, there was little there to give him confidence. The walls were old and the layout ripe for defeat, given the day's technology in tanks and trucks. Instead, Rommel would have much preferred to fall back another 15 miles to the Gabes Gap, because there he felt better about holding a line at the Wadi Akirit, having his line in between the sea and the extensive salt marshes of the Chot el Fajad. There would be no outflanking of his forces, and the Allies would be forced to fight head-on. Instead, Rommel would alter the deal. Instead of promising to hold out for 2 months, he would send his 21st Panzer Division to Armen to make sure that the enemy did not try to dissect Tunisia by thrusting towards Sfax or the Gabes itself, which is exactly what Eisenhower was planning to do. The British First Army had had its chance. Now let's see what the Americans and the French could do below the current area of combat. Ike put General Fredendall's 2nd Corps HQ in charge of creating the attack plan. The HQ had recently moved from Oran to Tebessa, which is located just west of the West Dorsal Mountains in mid-Tunisia, and their job now was to create the details of Operation Satin. This would include Major General Orlando Ward's 1st Armored Division and Major General Velet's French Constantin Division. The staff got to work. But as soon as the British heard of this, they said in chorus, no, and they did so publicly at the Casablanca Conference. The U.S. President, Churchill, and the combined chiefs of staff had assembled there to decide future strategy. But Ike used the meeting to seek the advice of General Alan Brooke, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, and General Harold Alexander, C&C Middle East, for their advice on Operation Satin. For the British, it was simple. For an inexperienced American force to advance east to the coast, putting itself in between Armen's forces to the north and Rommel's forces to the south, well, that was just suicide. And as much as he did not like it, Ike saw the wisdom of their thoughts and canceled Satin. Instead, Fredendall would adopt an aggressive defense just east of Tebessa. Further, Ward's division would be kept intact, to be ready like a fire brigade should the Germans make a move. Now, the next part requires a mental map. Starting midway down the eastern coast of Tunisia, but 50 miles or 80 kilometers inland, is the first of 2 mountain ranges. This one is called the Eastern Dorsal Mountains. It's just over 100 miles long, north to south, and has 5 passes within it. This was shielding the Germans from the growing Allied forces from simply deploying unencumbered and attacking. Now, just west of this long mountain range is the shorter Western Dorsal Mountain Range. It's just over 50 miles or 80 kilometers long and runs more to the southwest. And right behind it is the city of Tebessa, where the 2nd U.S. Corps was stationed, guarding the one rather large pass within the Western Dorsal Range. And just above the Western Dorsal Range, so in mid-Tunisia, but again about 50 miles from the coast, was the 19th French Corps. The port city of Sous was due east near the top of the longer eastern range, while the port cities Sfax and Mahares was just east of the southern end of the longer eastern range. With that done, at this moment, General Juin, now the French C&C commander under Giraud, had as many French troops as he could gather at the 5 passes along the eastern dorsal mountains, while the majority of U.S. troops coming in were either stationed behind the western dorsal mountains or placed in the plain between the 2 mountain ranges. This was all well enough, as long as it was not tested. The main reason for the lack of cohesion for the Allies was their command structure. The French, understandably, refused to be placed under British command, forcing Eisenhower to take the job himself. But he was too busy with the political as well as the military, and his number 2, Lucius Truscott, did not have the authority that Ike did. Thus, there were many breaks in the Allied command structure, as there were passes along the eastern dorsal mountain range. Not that the Axis command structure was in any better shape. Kesselring and Rommel started to hate each other. It was the same between Cavallero and Rommel, for the same reason, Rommel's impatience and his condescension. Meanwhile, von Arnim held a grudge against Rommel as he thought the Desert Fox was trying to outshine him. And General von Arnim was secretive. He only seemed to care about his 5th Panzer Army. And lastly, Rommel knew there were cabals of officers in Rome and Berlin trying to get him recalled and discredited. Thus, neither the Allies or the Axis could claim a dream team of command. And of course, there would be no new 6 or 7 divisions sent to Tunisia, as promised by Hitler. General Paulus's surrender at Stalingrad would make sure of that. So, after all the arguing, protestations, and lack of cooperation overall, and coordination, Kesselring simply ordered von Arnim to move against the enemy. The key was the 5 passes within the eastern mountain range. To control them was to be able to hit the enemy from multiple areas. Again, the French were on the western side of the passes for the Allies, the Italians on the eastern side for the Germans. But the Italians had German artillery and German tank detachments for support. General von Armin's plan was Operation Illa Bolta, or Operation Courier. He would take the passes one by one, starting in the north, and soon the Axis would control the center of the chessboard. This got underway on January 18th, with Fischer's 10th Panzer Division launching a diversionary attack on the British 6th Armored Division at Bel Arada, just north of the top of the eastern ridge. But the attack overall amounted to little. Between Allied artillery, their mines, and that damn Tunisian mud, the panzers were quickly bogged down. Panzer crews ended up, like the Americans had previously, jumping out of their tanks and jumping aboard trucks to take them back to camp. British sappers, seeing this, approached the panzers and attached explosives to them, while their engines were still running. Having said that, General Friedrich Weber's 334th Infantry Division, supported by mountain troops, also crossed over just over the northern end of the eastern mountain range and started heading south, and planned on attacking one French position after another, but from the rear. And this started out well, as the French lacked anti-tank weapons, so they started falling back. The first Allied position hit was at Roba, which was west enough that it was actually just above the shorter western mountain range. But then some parts of the German 334th moved further south towards the Kairouan Pass, the Middle Pass. Here, too, the French were forced back, not having the right weapons. But soon, rushing up to help them, was Combat Command B, formerly under General Oliver, now led by newly promoted Robinette, formerly the commander of the 13th U.S. Armored Regiment. Though outnumbered by the Germans, which would become more rare, Robinette used his forces wisely and did not try to win outright. He just kept the Germans from settling down inside the town there, located just west of the pass. Between this defensive gesture and a part of Kent Lemon's British 36th Brigade saving Roba, Operation Courier died a quick death of a sort. The only bad news now was that the Germans now had control of the Fonduc Pass, that is, the center pass of the 5 passes of the eastern range. The Allies tentatively still held the other 4. Still, this quick battle saw the collapse of the command structure, which equaled the speed of the fall of the French units. Again, they did not have the right equipment, which forced Eisenhower to pull them back and re-equip and retrain them, which is all they had wanted in the first place. And as for those gaps left by the pulled-back French, the British and the French were forced to thin out their units to plug the holes. Again, as long as they were not challenged by the enemy anytime soon, this should be an acceptable risk. As for the command structure problem, Ike tried to be too clever by half. He asked British General Anderson to coordinate the front, not command it, which of course failed immediately. Anderson was no Monty with a powerful personality to draw people into him, which would become soon clear enough. And also what would become clear was that Anderson was not the man to take control of a large force. Still, Anderson did try sincerely, and this was seen by the French, who decided to give it a try. Again, it wasn't a perfect arrangement, but as long as there was no German attack. 4 days later, after Anderson took control on January 30th, von Arnim launched another attack, and this time he had the borrowed 21st Panzer Division from Rommel. Worse, as this attack was launched, the commanders under Eisenhower were trying to make manifest his words to the combined chiefs of staff when he said, "Am attempting to organize and maintain a force to operate aggressively in the southern flank." Well, this was it, but problems rose immediately. General Fredendall was in the middle of his own operation, again trying to create a strong Allied front in the south. His goal was to clear the lowest pass through the eastern mountain range, Magnacy. First, Fredendall had Combat Command A, led by Brigadier General McKillen, help watch the Fayad Pass, that is, the second lowest pass, while Combat Command B, led by Robinette, moved to help watch the Fadouk Pass, the center one that the Germans controlled. But next is when Fredendall made his mistake. He had ordered General Ward of the 1st U.S. Armored Division to create two combat commands, CCC and CCD. The idea was to bloody these raw recruits by having them attack the Italians at the Station du Saned, 20 miles southwest of the Magnacy Pass, the most southern pass. This raid on the station went well for CCC. They took 100 Italian prisoners, killed another 100 more, but this alerted the Axis commanders that the Americans were going to try something in the far south. So soon, Axis forces were moving towards the Fayad Pass, the one just above Magnacy. Hearing of this German movement, the French generals Juin and Velvet suggested to Fredendall to hold off on sending CCC, now flush with victory, against Magnacy Pass, while CCD would go to Station du Sanid and occupy it properly. Fredendall ignored their concerns, saying, "Look, if I attack Magnacy, the Germans will focus there, and not at the Fayad Pass, above the fighting." This was to get underway on January 31st. And yet, Arnim started his attack 24 hours before Fredendall. In the early morning hours of January 30th, the 21st Panzer Division slipped through the Fayad Pass and surrounded the French garrison there. Behind or west of this garrison is the town Fayad proper, and the Germans took that as well. General Juin asked Fredendall for help, but the latter was focused more on his southern operation, so did not give the German attack the attention it deserved. CCD and CCC got on with their attacks at the Magnacy Pass and the Station du Sanid. Meanwhile, CCA tried to help the French on the 31st, reacting much too slow and too timidly, sending in 2 understrength battalion groups. They couldn't even get past the 21st Panzer's covering screen. 9 U.S. tanks were destroyed. Just over 1,000 French soldiers were taken prisoner. Now Arnim controlled all of the passes of the eastern dorsal mountain range. It would have been some consolation if Fredendall's attacks in the south were successful. but he only got half of what he wanted. First, just before CCC attacked properly, Fredendall had them halt as he was deciding whether to send them to Maknassi, though CCD did attack the Station du Senid, but as that location had received German and Italian reinforcements, again because the Americans had moved earlier, thus warning the Germans, plus German air attacks, the station held out for a while. It was taken the next day, but that was as far as CCD was going to get. They certainly could not fight their way further east to make for the Maknassi Pass. So it should come as no surprise that soon Ike and his commanders in Tunisia were being warned by Allied intelligence sources that the Germans were planning a large-scale attack, probably in mid-February, now that they controlled all the passes. Perhaps the attack would come from the Fonduque Pass, the center pass, which makes sense. From there, they had options open to them. They could go straight, north, or south. The Allies would have to spread out their forces to be ready for anything. But what the Allies did not know yet was that there was Axis infighting before their big attack. Rommel had a plan, as did Armin. Kesselring, once again, had to fly to Tunisia to play referee and judge. Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So, let's see here. The bad news for me, not for you, is that there's no donations or members. That's okay. It's only my birthday week. Let's not, no guilt. No guilt whatsoever. Don't worry about that. The good news is that I'm having the guys from the Warrior Next Door podcast back on this week. We're going to be covering the 5 largest mistakes, the 5 biggest mistakes of the Axis. I'm sure that won't cause any contention at all, and everybody will agree with us, and we'll agree with each other. Yeah, I don't see that happening. Anyways, so again, that's going to be recorded tomorrow. I don't know if that's going to come out this week because, again, it's my birthday and hopefully someone's planned something for me. I don't know. Anyways, but it's either going to come out this week, maybe Friday morning, or early next week. So we'll just have to wait to see how it goes. Anyways, so thanks for listening. And I don't know if you can tell or if you know more about what's coming, but this is setting up the Battle of the Kasserine Pass because there's the passes. The Germans are going to slap the Americans and the British around, and they're going to bring in Patton. So, we'll have to wait to see what happens. But again, it's building to that point. And the Americans are still learning, and the British just have to be patient because the transformation of power, of really being in charge, the bigger member, the smaller member of this group, it's starting to become obvious. But the transition has begun. So we'll see what happens politically as well as militarily as the episodes unfold. Take care, everyone.
From the creators of the popular science show with millions of YouTube subscribers comes the Minute Earth podcast. Every episode of the show dives deep into a science question you might not even know you had. But once you hear the answer, you'll want to share it with everyone you know. Why do rivers curve? Why did the T-Rex have such tiny arms? And why do so many more kids need glasses now than they used to? Spoiler alert, it isn't screen time. Our team of scientists digs into the research and breaks it down into a short, entertaining explanation, jam-packed with science facts and terrible puns. Subscribe to Minute Earth wherever you like to listen.